Again, I'm Brian Emerick with Emerick Architects. I'm going to talk to you today about storefront display windows. So we've already covered sidewalks, streetscapes, signage and lighting inside the store. This is one of the most important components, though, is the actual display window itself and thinking about that in more detail. So I'm going to talk to you in kind of big picture coming from the architectural side of how to create that, what the components are that make that up, and its importance. Seanette, my colleague, whose background is in merchandising and marketing, is going to talk to you about how to drill down into more detail on that and really stage those windows out and some of the design concepts involved with that part. So I like to think kind of big picture again too when we talk about the storefront window itself and what is its relationship to the building, but also thinking about coming back to the big picture concepts of these historic kind of commercial districts is how do you distinguish yourselves from your competitors, which might include strip shopping centers, malls, those kinds of things. Primarily we're more pedestrian oriented in the way we relate to our clients. We're more local owned businesses, and there's an authenticity often associated with these shopping districts that are more historic. So thinking about that, and it's an up close kind of fun personal experience. So here's a good example where you see all these great storefronts linked by the blade signs here. It's that experience where you're like, oh yeah, I want to just keep working my way down the street, and it's engaging and fun. That's kind of the ideal. And thinking about your storefront, this is the Ford building in Southeast Portland. I've got different examples throughout the presentation that kind of show some different spaces within this context, but here's a storefront display window within the context of the greater building. Just like your building, it might be one in the context of the main street, your storefront's often one in the context of the building. So it's thinking about building synergy in that and how you can do that with that relationship. One of the big things your storefront can do is communicate your business identity, and you want to make the most out of that. This is kind of an extreme example that they've owned the entire thing, and you know what that storefront is when you look at that. And furthermore, they've got this great operable door that blurs that pedestrian relationship from the street so that the store actually comes outside and you can go inside. Great example, they've even got their menu on the window. And then we most often associate these with product display, so thinking about how to stage these out. This is where Seanette's going to go into a lot of detail and give you some great tips and tricks. And as we were putting these together, one of the things I realized is, we often just think about products when we're thinking about storefront windows, but really we need to think about your business type because it's all display. So, retail is probably the most common, and then within that you need to think about the context of what kind of product you have. Like, this is Malka Jewelry, so they've got a really small, detail-oriented product. You've got to get it up so that it's close to the eye level and set off nicely so that you can get up and appreciate that small-scale detail. It's quite a bit different than someone who's selling clothes on a mannequin, say. But we also have different businesses that might be, oh, by the way, take a look at that. I'm going to come back with something kind of fun at the end into this little big picture set. But if you're a restaurant, you also have display windows. So this is the Trader Vic's in the Port building we did in the Pearl District, and we just installed these big operable door systems, which really puts the eating on display, and right away you realize, wow, that looks like a great place, I want to go there. So it's a different type of product than selling merchandise, but it's still communicating the same thing, and it's activating the street, which is really important. And this one, I'm going to go to the next slide and come back to that. This is in the Ford building, and it's actually a professional service. They're a marketing and graphic design firm in here. And this is actually pretty common in the main streets. We end up with kind of a mix. Sometimes there's an insurance salesman or other types of professional services, a lawyer, whatever. What we want to see is trying to activate those windows, though, still, not just having the Venetian blinds up and and it just shuts off that kind of engaging experience that's building the synergy in the district. So this is a good example where these guys actually have display windows, and they have little causes they'll do, like this one's kind of about arts in the schools, but they change these displays out. Sometimes it's their own work. And on the back side, they actually have this frosted glass so that the light can pass through, and this is the inside of their space. So they're actually got this great creative workspace in here, but they're not letting the window just go dead either on the outside. So they're activating that and making that part of their business. And that's a great thing because then it links them to the other businesses on the street. This is that zoom in I was showing you there. So it's pretty funny. I mean, this is actually what's kind of fun about the Main Street experience is that it's authentic. It's not a curated thing like the mall. Sometimes that might be negative. This is my daughter, whose name happens to be Lily. So great photo op. She won the pose for that shot. But you know, it's just about having fun and getting out there too. So and not knowing what's going to happen. So we talked about some of the components in the storefronts that make up the display window. These are, we're going to kind of get into these, but we've got the base zone, the glass, you know, basically the job for the architecture is to set the stage to be able to let you own that space and make it flexible. So we got ceilings, lighting, signage, and this idea of vertical layers, which we'll talk about. So coming back to this kind of diagram here, we had one earlier which was the whole building in the first session, but this one's a little more detailed. And you're going to see a case study, by the way, of this. This is the Portland Internet Works, which is at the end of my presentation. But showing just kind of, this is a real classic. You got the base zone, which lifts the glass up off the ground, helps protect it from impacts. It's cleanable. That area tends to get dirty. You've got the storefront display window itself. That's where usually the most activation is going on as far as your product display. Often a higher transom, which gives you that great volume in the store and really pulls light back into the space. And then you've got signage area here. Usually there's a marquee signage over the center and maybe a blade sign here around the pilasters. And a clear sense of what the store captures. So you've got, it's defined by the architecture of the pilasters, the cornice, and it creates a clear delineation of a bay, essentially. That's kind of your classic storefront. Oh, and often the entry's recessed. And then when we cut a cross-section through there, we kind of look at this idea of layers, and this is where Seanette's going to get into a lot more detail with you guys. But often, you know, on the outside we've got the base zone, on the inside we have a base zone too. Usually it's a platform or some way to get that product up again so that you can get it into eye level and engage with the pedestrian or the shopper. And we kind of look at this as three different layers. You've got the front layer, which is the glass, so we don't want to put too much product on that. We want to have that be pretty open, maybe some light signage on the window itself. The midsection where you're doing the bulk of the staging, and then some sort of a backstage, which doesn't need to be a big black box like we see a lot of the larger retailers doing. Often it's more engaging if that's open in some way, but you want to define the limits of where the vignette's going to happen. So some examples on that. This is the Ford building. Now this is right next to that creative marketing firm I just showed you the picture of the office one. So it kind of shows how the mix works in the building. But this is Rhapsody, which is kind of a custom clothes tailor. And they've got a great display going on though here. From the outside, they've got this bike in the window. There's some of these in the background. It's got a good three-dimensionality. And what's interesting though is the display is also interesting from the inside. So when you come inside, you're looking back out the window. You can see they actually just use like a reclaimed table to create that platform, get that product up there. And they've actually got kind of a challenging situation in that their building floor is down about a foot or a foot and a half from the sidewalk level. So often you might think, wow, that's not great for a retail environment. But the way they addressed that was they did this great shine sign in the back that's lit. So it's kind of at eye level as you come in, and it really pulls you into the store. And the product's so interesting through that retail display window that once you get in, you just want to keep working your way back into the store. So it's quite an effective way to do that. We talk about glass, glazing is glass. You know, there's kind of two things we think about there. There's the glass itself, and then there's the window display system where the glass is sitting in. So on the glass side, we like to look for clear glass, no tinting, and no reflectivity coatings on it. Low E coating's okay. It's not, that's not a bad thing. But if you start tinting the glass, it starts mirroring out because it gets dark. And also, obviously, coatings do the same thing. And then we've got usually three different types of component systems that we often see. This one's aluminum storefront. It's kind of a mid-century thing that came out. It's a little clunkier. but it's often the most affordable system, so you see quite a bit of it. This is just what we call a mill finish, so it's silver. You can also get it anodized, or you can paint it. Anodized is essentially kind of a metallic looking coating. And then the other two we see, and I'll show you examples of this as we go through, but it would be like a full-on, the other end of the spectrum would be a full-on custom wood storefront system, and kind of an in-between one would be an aluminum clad type wood storefront system, which gives you the durability on the outside, but more of a classic, smaller proportionate detail to the mullions and that kind of thing. Like this is usually about 1.5 inches and pretty square looking profiles. And again, just kind of looking at storefront, transom up above there, kind of the focus of the window. Bulkhead, which would be the base. So when we think inside, we also want to think about the ceiling structure. It's a great place to have some sort of infrastructure there to be able to support lighting systems and also be able to hang props and things from. This one's kind of an interesting one. I thought they did just this expanded metal mesh on a steel frame hung off cables, and allows you to be able to hook things into the mesh and hang down and also support track lighting off of that. Another simple solution is just some sort of a cable system. This is the IKEA one. You see, it's pretty affordable. Arakawa also makes a little more higher end ones, but there's quite a few of these out there, but they almost disappear and allows you to be able to hang your props and things off there. So it's thinking about setting that stage because you don't know what you're going to do, so you want it to be flexible. And lighting obviously is super important. So this is we talked about this before too, and I know Seanette's harped on this, but take a picture of your store during the daytime, then come back and take a picture at night. And even when you're not open, hopefully it's still working for you. This is a great example where, they're not open, but they're still selling product and creating an engaging display that makes you want to be still downtown, And again, depending on what kind of business you are, you need to think about what that lighting should be. So if you're a restaurant, you probably don't want spotlights on your patrons sitting in the window. You might want a little more candlelight, ambiance, and they've got colored lighting going on here. So think about who you are and what you're trying to convey. When we think about lighting in the ceilings too, there's a couple of areas, but one good area for lighting. Tracks are great things because it allows for flexibility again, and you can change out the heads, add heads. There's lots of lamping technology that's really flexible with the track. One good spot is if you have that transom, is to mount it on the back side so that you don't get any glare from the outside. It's just lighting the product itself. It's what we call a workhorse light. And then here's that ceiling structure potential up above. That could also be where the lights go. Sometimes you want to suspend them down though to that zone so you get a little more punchy light versus maybe having them clear up here. It just kind of depends on the architecture and what you're trying to do. These will be, here's some rough costing that Seanette shared with us, which is great. This stuff's also going to be posted online, so you don't need to write all this down.
I'll have to say, I just tried to, if you know how wide your storefront is, and you just wanted to do a quick mental calculation, so if you've got 20 feet of storefront, you can figure out 125 times 20 feet. And then you'd get a rough idea about how much it would cost you to start from scratch and get a lighting system in there with LED lights. So
yeah, that's great. Yeah. And then signage, we've already talked about signage as a whole separate topic of the Street Smart series, but this is specific just to the window itself. And we want to be real careful with signage on the glass. We don't want to compete with the product that you're trying to display. So a couple different examples in the same building here on Southeast Belmont, but same cupcake on the left, and noun, I like their moniker, a person's place for things, on the right, which is kind of a vintage store. And so on St. Cupcake, they're not really selling product in the windows so much as you can see them making the cupcakes. There's a kind of an engaging experience going on. So they've got a little bigger logo in the middle, but you can still see around it. On the noun, they've whited it out, and it's pretty small, and their moniker is kind of running across the bottom so that you really get more into the display window itself and how they're staging that out. So again, it's thinking about how you're going to display there and not letting the signage, and notice there's no tchotchkes or any other kind of flyers on the glass. It's pretty clean. Here's Zydeco. Also, this example I have just because white's a good signage to use. It doesn't compete with the color of the product, and it also shows up well with the dark glass. Seanette talks about this, and it's true where the glass reads as black a lot of times, even though you think it might be the opposite. So white's a good signage choice. and it's up high so that you can really see the product display down low. Step out of the way. This example is just talking again about those vertical display zones and a couple of great staged out windows in Seattle, but where they're using the full 3 dimensions of the glass. You know, you've got some signage on the glass plane, again, it's up high. Then you've got the mid zone, a backstop zone there, but you can still see around it and into the store, so it's engaging. They've created a really nice little vignette there. And they even added a 4th dimension of landscaping on the outside in front of the store. So it creates a really fun, you can just hang out and look at these windows, they're really interesting. Now I've got a few case studies, so we'll talk about a couple of these principles in as we go through. So Portland Internet Works. This is thankfully the before. Looking at what we can do with that space, and like you saw that first one where we broke down the components, we looked at some different paint scheme options, so that's kind of how we study those graphically. You still need to tweak the paint on site, but it gives you a pretty good starter so you know where you're going. And then again, thinking about all those different elements that we looked at. There's the finished product, what it looks like in real life. And this is so this would be more of the custom handmade wood window look. Actually, in this case, this came out pretty cost competitive with an aluminum clad wood window, which was great. Usually, this I would say usually is the higher end finish, but it's also the most historically accurate too. That's how they used to make them. One big storefront, plain, and then divided lights up above for the transom. There's the blade sign over the middle there. And then this is the day-night thing. So there's daytime, nighttime. Thinking about, you know, there's 4 different kinds of light going on here. You've got pilaster lighting, which is really about highlighting the architecture. You've got blade sign lighting, which is lighting the signage. Down lighting in the entries to keep those lit. And then you've got your display lighting in the storefront windows. So, and thinking about the lengthening and how much to do of each of those so that it's balanced properly is important. This one is the Anzacs flagship store in the Pearl District that we did. And before, when I got this, I was like, wow, that's the building you guys picked. Great. Needs a lot of work. On the outside, which normally is not the case if you're a tenant, you're expecting that part to be done. So we had to do put some money into the outside that they didn't have in the budget because that did not reflect Anzacs brand at all. So here they had, I'm going to go back for a second, the mill finish aluminum windows, and we did not have enough money in the budget to change those out. So the thing we came up with there was, well, let's paint them then. So, and it looks great. We did a high gloss polyurethane paint on there, and they look like brand new windows. It made a huge difference. They're black. Those are the Anzacs. We did small canopies on there. Got rid of those ugly green ones. Actually took the one off the main entry. And they're facing south, so we wanted to get a little bit of shading on the south, but without covering it with a big depth canopy like Michelle Reeves likes to talk about. New signage up there on the corner.
I also see there's a blade sign. I just noticed it on this display.
Yeah, right there.
Too.
Yeah. So we've got kind of that scalar signage happening there, and then painted the base zone, of course, and then again thinking about daytime and nighttime. So. Now, Anzacs does not go cheap on the lighting, which I thought was great because they've got great product and a lot of color. So we actually used metal halide track lighting, which I'd used before for gallery stuff, but I hadn't seen it used in a retail environment like this. And it's expensive, but it's really good, punchy, almost like daylight quality lighting.
So tell us about the Anzac sign because I see it's backlit up there. So how is that done?
Yeah, so we did, these are LED backlights, so it's a channel mounted with a pin mounted letter. So we wanted to create those independently versus creating like a big marquee there. And so in the daytime, it just reads as a pin mounted sign, and then at night it glows, and it's got this nice halo effect. So it's kind of subtle, it doesn't look like a big box LED sign. But yeah, that's a good catch. And then again, you want that display to be captivating on the inside. So these read as window displays from the outside, but you can actually walk between the window display and the window, and from the interior and check out all the product and stuff. So kind of clever, I think, by setting that back far enough and keeping it open so you can move between the display and the interior of the store. Allows you to be able to do that. And actually, one other feature I'll say is these are custom steel racks, and they're all designed there's a lot of flexibility because their product's changing constantly over time. So thinking again about how to build a permanent fixture that's flexible, and that's trickier than you'd think, because you have to think of all these different options, and then you also have to commit to certain things like the tile size layouts that they're going to do on the mosaics and that kind of stuff. So a lot of thought went into what permanent things to build into that fixture. We did the same thing on the floor. These are steel channels, flush, so you can actually change out the floor panels too. So the whole thing's kind of flexible that way. It's a floating floor. And then the last one here is Foster and Dobbs, authentic restaurant carving the corner market. There's the before up there. This one was obviously a major transformation. And we made an intentional design decision on the storefront to have these folding door systems. So this is similar to the Trader Vic's that we showed in the first slide. So that you could really open the market up and engage the neighborhood in a different way than just a storefront window system might do. And but this is a wood door system, and through here you see the glass display case of their deli, the wine back in here, so it's still got a staged kind of window display, but then again when you walk inside, you can walk between and into the display, so it's really captivating and fun to go in there and playing off some things, the lighting. Like we've got a lot of these track, again, workhorse type lights up high to create a lot of the heavy lifting of the punch, and then some fun things like the chandelier that's contrasted with the rugged original ceiling, so and the decorative kind of art glass lighting over the deli case, which is functional but also made to be seen, so thinking about those things. And
I love, Brian set the stage in terms of what physically goes into the window, creating that infrastructure, and that's so important because you have to have the basics in place before the best ideas in the world aren't going to do you any good if you can't execute them in your window, or if it just takes too long because you can't put it all together. So I want to talk about how to build your window once you got that infrastructure in place. And not only how to build it, but I want you to think about why, because unless you are motivated to do it, it's not going to happen. I won't kid you, it's a lot of work to plan your windows. And in order to maintain your initiative and your motivation throughout the entire calendar year and then the year after that, you have to be reminded about the why, and that's so important. And if you think about it, I don't know if you've ever run the numbers, but think about how much square footage you get for your sign. Maybe 12 to 15% of your overall storefront. Beyond that, your windows, on average, your retail storefronts, you're purchasing 140 square feet of prime, highly visible retail advertising space in your district, and you've got that every single month to use. And if you don't use it, you've wasted your money because you've already prepaid for that every time you write your rent check. So who wouldn't use that amount of space? That's up to, typically it's about 30% of your building surface is your window displays. Who wouldn't use 30% of your building but yet pay for it? So just keep that in mind, and it's prime advertising space. So once you know the why, the how that we pulled together, we want to talk about the planning. That's the base foundation. What do you want to do, and how frequently are you going to do it? And then from that, how do you build from the back of it towards the front of the window? How do you use all those vertical layers that we've outlined there with those different colors of blue? And then once you know what you want to do, how are you going to fill those middle spaces and create that interest and add the light to it? So I'm going to go through that here. I also want to outline too that I've got I have a few more slides in here that have more words than I typically have, because usually I just threw a bunch of pictures in there. But I just want to know that you can go find this online later on Metro's site, and there's a checklist at the end. And so if I skip over some things that do have a lot of text, that's because I know it's online, and you guys can go back and get that and read through it. And it's more of a checklist of what I'm talking about now, so I didn't want any anxiety in terms of, wait, don't skip past that. I want to see what that is. So the planning and the scheduling. People ask me, how frequently should I change my windows, and what am I signing up for once I invest in that? At a minimum, whether you've got fast auto traffic going by or slower paced pedestrian traffic, once a month at a minimum. And if your customers come back more frequently, you're going to want to think about doing it more, every 2 to 3 weeks, because they will get tired of seeing and start ignoring what you've got in the window if you don't change it out after, say, the 3rd visit that they come back. So understand how quickly the audience drives by or walks by, and how frequently your customers return on a regular basis. So that's understanding your customers' expectations and their frequency of visits. And I also put in here something that you can go back to. It's kind of a worksheet I've used in the past when I've been in charge of retailer store windows, and I map out the calendar year vertically, and then I've got my different headers up here in terms of the initial infrastructure, what you might end up spending to get your windows set up. That's permits and design fee and buying your lights and your track, and also I included the cost of LEDs. I just kind of went for the top of it, because once you buy it, you don't have to think about it. No burned out bulbs, lower energy costs, lower heating costs, a lot of benefits. So you got your budget here for props on average, and your first year you might be spending more because you're kind of getting your inventory, and then each year it starts to decrease in cost because I can pull that out. Also think about neighbors that do furniture or antiques or other useful household things. You can kind of swap and use their furniture as props, and a lot of times the props end up selling right out of the window besides the product that you're using, so it could be a great relationship with your neighbors. We've got, plan the product that you want to, fill it in based upon what it is that your seasons represent, and what's the theme going to be, a color or a season or a texture, or it's gardening and you want to use hoses and ropes and hose, and then your props that you're going to be purchasing to plan, what do you want to use relative to that particular theme. And also in your cost, I want you to think about your time. What's the cost of your time and what's the cost of your staff time gathering the props, putting the window together? It could take, if you're doing it by yourself, up to a day to take out the old stuff, put it away, and bring in the new stuff. So budget that time in your calendar to do that. And also think about who you delegate it to if you don't have the time to do it yourself, because you to hand it off to somebody that's untrained about visual display or what your message needs to be, and that thing's going to be up for a month, you're kind of letting the lowest, that's your branding and that's your messaging. And to turn it over to somebody that doesn't have an understanding of that, just think twice about it and really check in and make sure that you've got execution to your standards. So the basics of the window, people forget that this is more, there's more to the window than just the glass and the window ledge. And I had to put that in there because I see a lot of examples of people putting just using the window ledge. They're just using what they think the window offers, the glass and the ledge. And they'll put suction cups on the glass, and then they'll hang a hanger, and they'll put a t-shirt on the hanger, and they stick it, and they just slam the product right in your face, blocking sightline into there. And then this turns into a garage sale look right here, just only putting things on the window ledge. And that just doesn't communicate. It's not inviting people in visually. They don't have to look much further. They don't have to kind of artificially into your store through their windows. It's just right there, and it's so close to the ground, it almost feels as though it's on the ground. It's on a utilitarian piece. It's not elevated. It doesn't feel for sale. It just feels kind of randomly stored. These are the areas, the vertical spaces that you want to activate, the backdrop, the middle zone, and then the foreground area. And I'm going to go through what to put in each of those. This is a great example of what we're going to, the end game is going to achieve, where you've got, along with Brian had a great example too, you've got a backdrop, and that's tall, and then you've got the middle area, and I've just numbered them here, so when you go back later on, like, why did they put that picture in there? So the middle area is activated, and they've added their own pedestals to lift, and props to lift up the product. They've also, not in this area, they have to put products so close in that little light blue area. They're not slamming things up against there, but they've, and then number 4, they've added just a little bit outside the center of the window to kind of add that 4th layer. They're activating the glass right there, so it adds that full dimension. It's just a shadow box. Think about, you're framing a picture and you're using a shadow box. I also want you to think in terms of thirds, from left to right and then from top to bottom. And it's cubic space that we're activating. So you've got to use front to back, top to bottom, left to right, right to left. And knowing that you've got this cubic space to work with, these little red circles represent from standing outside looking in at your windows. If it's to the left side of the front door, start it high on the outside and bring it sloping down towards the front door. And then on the opposite side, just kind of guide the eye with these angles of display. The display angles kind of lead you towards the front door. And you want the tallest thing in the back, and that's why I've placed the red circle for the tallest thing in the back plane, close to the backdrop, and then opposite on this other side, and then move your way forward as you build it out. And up here, In order to activate that space, you have to have that infrastructure in place, whether or not you end up getting grid wall, or you come up with a framework and put expanded metal on it, or you're going to use the cable system. I've seen dowels, a variety of things, but that if it's not there, you're going to have to, you're not going to hang something in the middle, and it'll get frustrating because you're going to want something right there, and you have no way to access that space. So give yourself the gift of that infrastructure. And then this is, I really like to put the lights right there on the cornice line. So the backdrop. And you have to decide if you want to leave it open, which I tend to go more open than closed off, or some combination in between where you might just have a little screen or some little ribbons, something that helps visually define but not completely block. And even the example that Brian provided with the graphic design firm, you've got that opaque screen. So they did block it off completely, but they still allowed the light to come through. So you've got choices here. The downtown big city windows tend to have enough square footage that they can completely block it off, and they've got the staff to go in there and repaint all the surfaces that you see. And while it's nice to aspire to those type of windows, you can get close to achieving a look with some of your other backdrops without trying to duplicate this completely. Because if you block off your windows like this, you're going to, it's just going to darken up the store. You've lost your natural daylight coming in, and that separates you and the pedestrian from the Main Street experience. So while it's fun to look at these, big city windows downtown, we can take the elements from this and then apply them to your stores on Main Street. And think about the back side as well as the front side, but look at more of an open structure. Here's something that's kind of a halfway in between. Somebody used some curtains, and I've seen a variety of ways to do this, so they might end up draping them and allowing the customer to see through past their display. What I would do in terms of the next level of improving this display, because I want to give them points for understanding the concept of separating and framing the window. What I would do though, and I put it in the notes here too, so if you go back, and I hope I'm not blind, I realize I might be halfway through here, is that I would want to lower the curtains because it feels like they're just kind of floating up and bringing my eye a little bit too high, and I would just pick one color, because this backdrop to me with the blue and the teal and the white is conflicting with the vertical of the mannequins in there. So, and I like the fact that they've got the 5 mannequins and they've kind of got some elevation differences here. That would just be some subtle improvements that I would make. They've got lighting up here, which is great. So they're getting close. It's just those final little tweaks to really give it that polish that we're going for. Here's another example. This is up in Stevenson, and these were opaque backdrop panels. I think she might have gotten those from IKEA. She had a lot of other things in her store that had been seconds, and she would take a cabinet door front, turn it on its side, and make a shelf out of it. It was a really fun place. I was busy looking at this, had as much fun looking at the fixtures as I did the product in the store. But what's great here is that you can merchandise on the back side of that too. It kind of gives you permission. Okay, now I'm going to start making room for my customers on the inside as well as shopping on the outside. And devoting space, I want to just make a comment, devoting space to a window display is not giving up retail space. It's window shopping for a reason. People do shop that. They might not be standing in your store, but it's still active retail space. So it's not conversational. I can't lose that space. I'm like, you're not losing it. We're activating both sides of this, the outside and the inside. So, but sometimes it's tough to carve that out because you want to cram as much inventory per square foot as you can, because you got to find space for everything that you bought. Think about the backdrop too. You got the versatility built in, kind of a semi-open back. Think about the contrast of your backdrop relative to what it is you're putting on the inside, so you can create a silhouette. These two are opposites. You have a darker fabric on a white background, and here you have a lighter fabric on a dark background. And so I think that's that next layer of understanding how the colors are going to play with one another. Back to that, what we discussed at previous seminars. The lettering is out here, kind of off to the side, just frames, kind of scoops you in towards the front door that's going to be over here to your left. And this looks like either paper or vinyl printed backdrop in here, just on a pole. And I've used sheets before where I just hung them and steamed them and just had them hang perfectly straight. Here are two other examples, ribbons on the one. Props, by the way, a bike is almost as good as a mannequin. It's a lifestyle thing. People are attracted to other human forms, but also bikes are just, you see them in a lot of advertising, lifestyle. Get out there, be healthy, or be cool, but bikes are a great prop to have too. You can put baskets on the front, put things in them. But these backdrops here, I digress on the prop thing. The doors separate the inside from the outside, and this is another little ribbon thing. So activating the middle space. Big props are going to be your best friend. The bigger the better. People just pick up on it, and it helps simplify your message versus a lot of little tiny things. When you have little tiny things, we'll talk about how you divide your window and focus your eye for little pieces versus the big pieces. Think about the ratio of props to product. If you were to take all the pots and pitchers and plates and platters out of here, probably 75% of this display is prop. The rest is product. It's really minimal relative to the size of it and how the color comes through. So the bigger the better, and the more use color to draw the eye through. They do a great job here. The little runner that hangs down over the edge kind of fills the empty space underneath the table. It might feel like it's kind of empty, but think the color in terms of the flowers too. So that ratio of props to product is something that you want to think. That's why it's so important to plan your windows and bring that texture and color and scale, and then it supports your product, because the eye gets drawn in with that, and then it discovers your product along the way. Same thing here, the power of these inexpensive crates. They painted the inside of them and suspended them in the windows, but within each one is its own little vignette. But at a distance, you just see these colored boxes and you got texture, so you're drawn in by the props and you discover the product along the way. Same thing here, the props really set this tone and powerful shapes in terms of the colors and the size. They're selling the bag and the clothing. That's a lot of room, but you come over and you observe it, and it's just as fun to see it on the inside of the store as it is the outside. Another example of props to product. So you can kind of get that rhythm of you need stuff underneath your product. Repetition is a good thing too. I think if you have something, a lot of frames, don't just do 5. If you're going to fill the space and that's all you got with frames, do 25, because we delight in seeing things repeated. And then from that, these are all black and white. It's fun to set a pattern and then break it. So wouldn't it be neat if you had one powerful color, if that thing were in color and everything else were in black and white? Now you can play within the own repetition that you've created. And this is just a great example of just the pillars serving several purposes, lifting the product up and providing the backdrop. These they've used the inside of the window well. They've got height in the back and it scales down to the front. You've got color coordinating, leading the eye. Same thing here. You've got the height, something in the back, the tallest thing in the back, and then it scales forward. Props, I want to take a couple of minutes to talk about props, specifically bicycles, like I mentioned earlier, mannequins, because we are drawn to the human form. Even if you're a hardware store, you can find all sorts of ways to use a mannequin, putting an apron on, a work belt, a work shirt, or some, draping some shoulder bag over it. You can always find a use for a mannequin. Pedestals, boxes, turning trash cans upside down, chairs are great, just big pieces that you can set something on. And mannequins, new ones, if I'm going to really suggest that you get a mannequin, just know what it's going to cost, anywhere from $140 to $240 for a brand new mannequin. Or if you time it right and you're lucky and you can find a used one, we're lucky here in Portland. We have a store recycling company, Portland Store Fixtures. I end up going through there a lot of times, and just if you time it right, you can really find the great thing. Or you can, Granite Benedict's is another local fixture supplier here where you can buy new mannequins. See, here's a cupcake shop. Who would have thunk a cupcake shop could use a mannequin? But they did. They're selling t-shirts, and then they decorated, gave her a little fun packaging, or a skirt made out of the packaging. Moving to the other arrangements, I want to talk about some of the basic principles of those triangles and the height that I'm talking about. So you want to think in terms of what kind of triangle can you create. And this one's pretty obvious here in terms of stacking, but they also use color. And then they've got something here in the foreground besides. These are just boxes with large colored copies glued to the front of them. It'd be easy enough to do that with cardboard boxes, wrap them with craft paper, and print out a pretty big picture and glue it to the front. And that way you might have taken a small product of yours and kind of supersized it, kind of Andy Warhol it. You can get creative with the interpretation of that. And here's an example of, it's not super obvious like this triangle, but you can start to see the principle at play in terms of finding something tall and bringing the eye down and then filling in underneath. But you can see the triangles at play. Suddenly you can see triangles everywhere in good window displays. And this is something I took a picture at Disney. The lights focused at the top of this pyramid here, 5 mannequins. When something's stacked on a pedestal and they don't have room to line it up, there's 3, and there's a pyramid there, so there's 3 cones across here. 3 spots of yellow in the background. You see the pattern, it becomes really obvious. So odd numbers, 3s and 5s, and triangles. In this case, the prop draws you over these big inflatables, and it's the color and the size that gets you engaged with the smaller pieces underneath down here. And this is just a great example. They've used books to prop up the shoes, and they've got 3 of them, and they've got 5 stacks of folded t-shirts in front of it. So you start to see this pattern that's out there. And there's not a triangle here, but when you have the 3 and you do them symmetrically, it still feels kind of balanced. With that odd number, it gives you that symmetry. Here's 3 tubs tipped towards the front. They've angled these bins here. When you have something that large and cavernous and it's tipped, you want to fill it with something else, so don't leave these big gaping holes in your display. 3 mannequins right here, 1 slightly taller in the middle, and then they've just layered the product. They didn't just spread it out across the ledge, all these cute little bunnies. They've just built them all into these displays and tucked them back in. The middle ground, in terms of the finishing touches, this 3rd area, that's kind of like the no man's zone. I wouldn't put product directly on the window. You could put a sign layer on the glass, but putting stuff right that close to the window is kind of a no-no. And I just kind of, it's a buffer zone is what I call that. And this just repeats what Brian talked about. I was trying to remember why I put this slide in here. We kind of covered this. So just a refresher. Here's where we put a name of this clothing store. This is over on 23rd, on the glass, not blocking their product. And even when the store lights are turned off, we've got the separate circuit for the front window lights from the rest of the store, so those stay on all the time. That's another thing to think about in terms of when your electrician wires things up, that you have a separate line to your front window display lights. This store went out of business a few years ago. I just happened to take a picture of it before it left. But it had an eating area. You just didn't see inside it. It wasn't for that type of logo at that size on that window. It just blocked your sight line into the store, and it just turned you away versus invited you in. Something like that size and that solid of a logo, it would have been nice to see it on the wall on the inside and then shine lights on it so I can visually come in. I'm already coming in with my eyes. Next thing my body's going to follow versus just stopping me right there. And then it's just static. It's always, oh, I've seen it once, it's a sign. Nothing's going to change, but a window, that's going to change. Here's layers. They painted the tree on the window and then did this these were real branches with real twinkle lights suspended from a bar at the top of the window just to take the little blossoms of the tree across the window. There's no product here, it's just grass, so it's a buffer zone, so we're not actually putting for sale stuff. And then you've got your different heights right there in the middle, and they're kind of filling the space down here versus just leaving it empty. And same thing here, this was a nice layering. They're using the glass, they're not blocking, and they're using their backdrop and they're filling it. I also like, if you don't have say if you don't have your track light installed yet, I'm just assuming yet, you can put light fixtures in your display. That also adds a lot of punch. And it's actually fun when you have light fixtures in your display and you have light shining onto your display, so you get this even more dynamic layering. And this is another example. I used liquid chalk pen on the glass, kind of a poor man's vinyl. Instead of paying for lettering to go on there, I just put a stencil and just kind of filled it in. And then you just wipe it off with water when you're done. It's really easy to take off. How to divide your windows down a little bit. This is a jewelry store that brought you closer because of the scale and pattern of the color. You see that vertical, and then you have that little cubby right there, and it's lit just inside. So that was a nice way to focus the eye. And this was just vinyl with that frosted look to it, framed in between around the windows, and on above these prom dresses and beneath it, you can kind of catch a glimpse. It was a really industrial salesman rack. I mean, the big casters like that and big chrome bars, but they kind of took that away by focusing the eye and blocking the window out with the vinyl. And that's a blocked window, but if you're going to do it, they just committed to it. And they said, well, let's just use the opposite space and carve out the shape of the message that we want. So I thought that was fun to see. Great examples here, backdrop, middle ground. You can see the light coming down on the red. You wouldn't see that otherwise. The front doors to the left here, they've scaled it and brought this angle down here, and then the red coat right on your way in. On the glass, middle area, I just love they've got the backdrop, they've got a couple lights pointed at it, and that they took the paint can lids and turned them into the colorful little circles. They're just repurposing things they had. Some other examples of symmetry and layout. The 3s up here, tall, medium, short, 5 pictures, symmetrical. They filled underneath the table with the basket and put the pillows, and they actually have light in the display. This was an in-store display, but I could haul that piece for piece and put it in the front window, and it would look just great. Another thing in downtown Portland too, where you see they're using color, they're using scale, they're using placement, they've got the backdrop, it's not competing with it, they've kind of neutralized it with that opaque screen. Placing your lights and aiming your lights. Those yellow lines represent where you're aiming the lights. And the lesson from this, whether they're high or whether they're a little bit lower, these are your common retail fixtures that I recommend getting for your track. And this has to do with, you can add them, you can take them, you can move them around, but you need that versatility because your ideas are going to change and you need the light to go with you. And when you choose light bulbs, it's about choosing the right light and putting it in the right place. And different lights shine a different lamps shine a different amount of light, a different amount of distance. So your spotlights, this is the beam spread. When they talk about the beam spread, 10 degree, it's like a jet stream of light to your product at a distance versus your big wide floods. It just kind of, bleh, there's your light. There's some light, it's good. So you just have to learn when you're going to use these tools to highlight or just generally illuminate. And when you aim lights, not only how much light is coming out and how wide, but how are you going to cross it. If you do it at an angle, you can get more light across your product versus straight on. It's just a really intense piece of light. And if your light source is too close to your product, you're going to get this big hot spot and it washes out the color. It's just kind of obnoxious. So you have to think about how far away and then how you're going to cross light it. And right here is the perfect spot. That's the part of your product that you want to highlight when you're washing it from the right and the left. That's why I had those 2 arrows crossing down. And then your favorite spot that you want people to see is right here in the crosshairs. You know, we pull out my map, you know, the Venn diagram, the intersection of circle A and circle B. Same sort of thing here. So using the flood and washing it. What you don't want to use in your retail front window display are these little CFLs because they don't put light anywhere. They just kind of throw it all over the place. It's just that. And it doesn't make it look any better. And these lightsabers, the fluorescent lightsabers, all they do is just like draws my eye up there like a moth to light, and I just die there and I'm done looking at the display. It's the wrong color and it's in the wrong place. And if you put your track in the ceiling, great location because it's up high, but move it towards the front window because to aim those down towards your product, more of that light's going to hit your customer's eyes than it is your product. And so you don't want to have your customer blocking their eyes to see your product. And right now this is great for October. We've got Halloween coming up, so if you want this scary kind of, you can put your lights on the ground, but that doesn't make this type of dress or that type of product look attractive. So where you put them, now you got to get the right light bulb in there and then put it in the right place. All this stuff that you have to consider here. There are LEDs out there now that have the right color rendering index to choose from, and that's for another topic without getting too detailed. But I do at least 3 in any window, 3 lights. Start with that and grow up to 6, and then you can add a little bit more from there, but at least 3. The spotlight here, you can see your eye goes straight to that, then it drops. There's some wash over the front, and then there's a second layer of the most intense light, and then it draws your eye over to the pillow right here. So you can just see what the light does to finish a display off right there. So we started just a little bit late, like about 7 after or so, and it's 9 o'clock right now. And we usually like to save a little bit of time at the end for questions. And if anybody has to like open their store at 9:05 and you're 3 minutes from here, I just wanted to let you know. Otherwise I've got just a little bit more here. I know we turned the light off. I felt that your video might be, but you've got audio and pictures. And this is, I thought, I don't usually use the walls outside of a window because I want to build up on the inside, but can you imagine if they did have lights in here, what they could do to aim, this was an office, if they could aim 1 or 2 lights on these iguanas over on the wall, it would just stop me in my tracks. Tips and tricks, and this is just the end of it here. Take a picture of your store during the day, and then write the dimensions on there.